Hi everyone, it's Chris. Today I have a very simple, very sweet friendship card to share with you today. I am using the stamp set from Altenew called Sweetest Peas. I'm using the gray toned paper from Strathmore 400 series, and I'm using my original MISTI and my Creative Corner to do my stamping. I'm using my Creative Corner because I want these images, the stems of these flowers, to stamp off the side of my panel. And by using the new corner that's created with the Creative Corner, that gives me that extra space for that stamp to hang over the edge. I'm stamping with Ink on 3's Fade Out ink, not because I'm going to be doing no line coloring with this, just because I wanted a really soft, very, very subtle ink, just enough to give me this outline to color. I'm going to be heat embossing this again after a bit. So you see that I left my stamps in my MISTI and just set it aside for a little while. I'm using Polychromos pencils from Faber-Castell to do some very light coloring. I want the blooms of these sweet peas to be very soft, very subtle, and almost like translucent on my paper. So I started with a very light pink peach color, and I just put a little color towards the base of each of those flowers. And then I'm adding some bright white to highlight the ends of the petals. I know that when I heat emboss over the top of this, my colors are going to fade just a little bit, just from the heat of the heat gun. The oils of the oil pencils will kind of almost melt into the paper a little bit, so I'm coloring kind of heavy right now. And now I'm adding just a little bit of a brighter pink just towards the center because I do expect quite a bit of fade. Now I'm coming back with that peach colored pencil, and I'm just going to tie the two colors together. I'm going to add just a little bit of greenish gray first to the stems of my flowers. Very little of this green is going to show up once I heat emboss, but I want to have a little color to it. So I started with a greenish gray, and then I'm adding just a little bit of a brighter green. Now that my coloring is done, I'm going to go right back to my MISTI. My stamps are still in place, and I'm going to go right back to that same corner. And since I'm going to heat emboss this, I want to put my sentiment in at the same time and just heat emboss everything all at once. So I've tucked my sentiment in, I use my powder tool to prep my paper, and now I'm going to stamp it with Ink on 3's embossing ink. I'm going to set my MISTI aside again, and here is my Gina K white powder, which I love because it is such a nice fine detail powder. I'm going to make sure that I have this covered all the way, and then I'm going to heat it with my heat gun. And I can tell right away that I missed a little tiny spot in my embossing. I'm missing just a couple of letters that didn't get inked up well enough. I didn't add enough pressure right in the corner where those three stamps were meeting. So I'm going to put it right back into my MISTI and just give it a little bit of ink and a little pressure right for those letters. And I know it's going to stamp in the exact same spot. So now I can heat emboss just that little area, and my card is finished with my embossing. But you can see that all of the fade that happened when I used the heat gun here on the oil-based pencils. So I'm going to go back with the white and just give a little more highlight here. I'm just going to brighten it up just a bit. I like how this very pastel, very light coloring looks on the gray paper because it makes things look so translucent and very light and airy. And that was the look that I was going for with this very simple card. Now I'm going to mount this to a innocent pink card base. This cardstock is from Gina K Designs, and I always like to flip my panel over just to kind of give me an idea of where to line it up because I am eyeballing this. So that gives me a good idea of how to lay that in there. I had cut my panel using a pinked edge rectangle die. This happens to be from Reverse Confetti card. And now I want to add a little bit of bling. So I'm using Nuvo Morning Dew Drops, and I always test it on a piece of scratch paper just to make sure that the drops are coming out of the bottle well. And I let it dry overnight, and here's my finished card. Thanks for watching, everyone.